The year was 1998, and I was in middle school. During this time, I had already been playing games like Resident Evil and Final Fantasy. In fact, later in the same year, my favorite Zelda game would be released. It was also during this time that Tamagotchis were popular, and so my friends and I had Digimon Tamagotchis and would constantly battle using them. Something then happened that would change our lives forever and change the gaming world forever. I'll admit, when Pokemon Red and Blue released here in the US, I wasn't excited about playing it. In fact, it took my friends to convince me to buy it. But I was in middle school at the time, and I was already playing more mature games, such as the aforementioned games. I didn't think a cutesy game like Pokemon was for me. Boy, was I wrong. This game would become the beginning of a franchise that would have an effect on me for the rest of my life. So we have to start with the marketing for this game.
Hey, little buddy, want a ride?
Pikachu!
Yeah, whatever. I'll be right back.
Where can you catch all 150 Pokemon? On your Game Boy, that's where. Pokemon for Game Boy is here. With both packs, you can catch them all. Games and systems.
I have to say that the marketing turned me away from the game instantly. The marketing focused heavily on Pikachu and a lot of the cute Pokemon, which made me feel like the game wasn't for me.
Look who's back. And this time, the two of you are partners in the latest installment of the Pokemon saga. It's Pokemon Yellow, the special Pikachu edition for Game Boy Color, where it's you and Pikachu catching as many as you can together. Look for the Pokemon Yellow Bundle Pack. It includes a limited edition Pokemon Game Boy and Yellow Game Pack.
Editor Goshen here. Just really quick, did you see that commercial? What was that kid doing with that Dragonite? I just want to know. He has him locked up in a cage and he's hauling him off somewhere. Where's he taking that Dragonite? Like, I feel like he's poaching him or gonna like chop him up and sell him in the black market. I don't know what is up with that commercial. Like, it's a really sadistic commercial. He's not using Pokeballs at all. He's like legit catching the Pokemon. Like, that Hitmonlee fell in a trap pit, and that commercial is just all sorts of wrong. I just had to point that out. Let me know down in the comment section. Let's get back to normal video. In a year where Resident Evil 2 released and was being heavily played by me, I just didn't seem to understand the popularity of Pokemon with cute little monsters. Once I caved to my friends' demands for me to get this game though, it came down to what version I would buy. In Japan, the game's released with red and green version, while in the US they released red and blue. And I have to admit that had the green version released here, I would have bought that one because my favorite color is green. At the time, two of my friends already had the blue version, so I was convinced to buy the red version. But it turns out, I didn't need convincing, since on the cover of the red version was Charizard, one of the coolest looking Pokemon in the first generation, and a Pokemon that would become my favorite Pokemon as well as arguably the second most iconic Pokemon next to Pikachu. When starting up the game for the first time, I admit it felt magical. Similar to how it feels when you first turn on a Zelda game. You know you're going on an epic adventure, cued by the music. And as I heard the audio go from the stars falling across the Game Freak logo, to then starting the iconic theme we all know, I immediately felt like I was going to lose myself in the game's adventure. I recently revisited the game after all this time on a live stream, and the music still gives me that same feeling. That feeling of nostalgia, that feeling of adventure. What's up the music? I know, it's so much nostalgia, all wrapped up into one beautiful 8-bit tone, you know? Now from this point, as we take a look at the game, I'll try to stay objective as possible. But when it comes to a game like this that holds such a strong place in my heart, some comments might seep through, and I hope you forgive me for that. But now, let's take a look at this game that started the Pokemon craze properly. At its core, Pokemon Red and Blue, as well as every entry after, are typical role-playing games of the era. Just like other games, such as Final Fantasy, Shin Megami, Wild Arms, and so on, the Pokemon games feature a party of different characters with their own abilities and stats. At a brief glance, it's all very simplistic. You have HP, defense, special attack, special defense, physical attack, and speed. Combined with available moveset to teach the different Pokemon you have your basic RPG mechanics. Where this changes though, is through the evolution mechanic that changes your Pokemon into a more powerful creature. With higher stats and new available moves, and in some cases, even new type weaknesses and type effectivenesses as they evolve into stronger Pokemon. Each Pokemon is only allowed to have 4 abilities in their moveset. This allows for certain strategy when it comes to raising your Pokemon. Though in Red and Blue, it doesn't seem to matter as much as in later entries though. For example, in Red and Blue, you can have your Pokemon have straight attack abilities, where in other later entries, you have to variate between defensive capabilities, recovery, and status-inducing elements. Let's take a look at Charizard, for example. In Red and Blue, you'll probably have a moveset such as Flamethrower, Fire Blast, Earthquake, Body Slam, and maybe Swords Dance. You might also take Slash instead of Swords Dance for its high critical hit rate. Though, critical hit rate in this game is, dare I say, a little broken, in the sense that it bypasses all stat boosts in both a negative and positive way. Now the reason I give this example is because it's very common for most Pokemon in Red, Blue, and Yellow to carry 3 or 4 attack abilities. And in Red, Blue, and Yellow, it becomes a problem because these 3, being the first generation of the games, carried the least amount of options. If I were to take a look at Charizard in later entries, you could see it having movesets with Dragon Dance and Thunder Punch to counter oncoming water types, since now its movesets have opened up. Combat itself is relegated to a rock, paper, scissors type of combat. This type of system is very common in RPGs with elements. Usually you're used to seeing elements such as fire, water, earth, or wind, where water beats fire, fire beats wind, wind beats water. Pokemon takes this a step beyond with a total of 15 different types or elements to have to memorize effectiveness with. This isn't usually a problem, but it becomes quickly apparent that there are types that are much more dominant than others, and some types are just useless. To give an example of this, bug types are relegated to the uselessness. The only type that is weak to bug is Psychic. Oh, and we'll get to Psychic. Meanwhile, this might seem like a good thing, but problems lie in the fact that bugs have very low stats, and most don't even learn useful abilities. The ones that do are weak to Psychic, which negates the whole point. In every playthrough I did for Gen 1, the only bug type that I found any use for was Butterfree, and that was because it learned Confusion, a Psychic ability, and it learned it early, which was good for a sweeper from early to mid-game, especially against Team Rocket's heavy poison types, or against gyms such as Koga. In fact, it really wasn't until Gen 3 where Heracross itself got a buff with movesets that we got ourselves a useful bug type. But I digress, because we need to talk about the other end of the spectrum. Psychics and Dragons. Most players back in Gen 1 would consider Psychics to be the most powerful type, and with good reason. Alakazam is a late game Pokemon, has one of the highest speed stats in the game, which is coupled with a high special attack and special defense, and it makes it for a very strong sweeper. Then there's Mewtwo, and potentially Mew, both of which can basically learn any ability in the game, and both of which have astronomically high stats. It's hard to argue that Psychic types are broken. This leads to a very unbalanced situation when it comes to competitive play, which we'll get to. Then there's the dragon types. In Gen 1, dragon types are pretty much just there. The only dragons are the Dragonite line, and in Gen 1 there isn't much going for them. Dragons are weak to dragon and ice, and resist electric, fire, grass, and water. But here's the problem. There's only one dragon move, Dragon Rage, which does 40 damage no matter what. So it doesn't take advantage of Stab, which is same type attack bonus, which gives a 50% boost in damage. And with Dragon and Ice being the only available weaknesses for dragon types, they can make for very bulky Pokemon, or they would if they actually had abilities to make themselves useful. Another Pokemon that kind of gets the shaft and continues to get the shaft through all generations is Flareon. The evolutionary line of Eevee is an interesting one because you get the option to choose between Jolteon, Vaporeon, or Flareon. Most, if they needed a sweeper, would opt for Jolteon, while others who needed a defensive Pokemon would opt for Vaporeon. Flareon, who has one of the highest attack stats in the game, has no available moves to take full effect of the attack stat. Now that I've talked your ear off, though, regarding combat, let's talk about the story. The story of Pokemon Red and Blue is a simple one. Boy meets Pokemon, Pokemon and boy adventure. They take down a wannabe Pokemon mafia and become the league champion. Pretty straightforward, at least for the most part. In reality though, reality for the game at least, there are a lot of stories found throughout your adventure that bring together a total lore for this generation and Kanto altogether. So let's get into the lore and discuss how deep it can actually get. Let's start with Team Rocket. Team Rocket as a whole acts as the antagonist for the game, to the point of them becoming an annoyance more than anything else. It's very similar to the anime. Team Rocket is led by a Giovanni, who you end up fighting twice before finding out he's the leader of the final gym in Viridian City, where you encounter him one last time. In Pokemon Yellow, which adapts more of a anime-style storyline, Jesse and James are present throughout the game. The main objective of Team Rocket is to take over the world with Pokemon they steal from others. Now, I always thought this was a very dumb plot line for a villain of a game. It doesn't make sense. In a world full of Pokemon, why would you waste more effort trying to steal Pokemon as opposed to trying to catch them yourself? That's counterproductive. You could get stronger Pokemon just out in the wild, catching them, raising them, as opposed to trying to steal them and getting caught and arrested and beaten by a 10-year-old child. But besides this, Team Rocket actually did do some villainous things, such as killing Cubone's mother Marowak in Lavender Town, or in Gen 2 where the remnants of Team Rocket sold harvested Slowpoke tails. But while this is seen as a bad thing in Gen 2, it apparently becomes common practice in later entries, as you can buy Slowpoke tails as a common dish in a lot of the other games. I guess Team Rocket actually won on that one. After defeating Giovanni, he announces he will be disbanding Team Rocket, and true to his word, they vanish. Mostly until Gen 2, as I mentioned, but we'll cover that in the Gen 2 retrospective. Traveling through Kanto, you run into a bunch of different NPCs, most of which have little to no actual story, such as Bill or most gym leaders. Now, you might be saying, but wait, Bill is actually an integral part in the story because Bill's PC. Yes, I do agree with you on that aspect, but other than that, he does nothing for the story. Just like in the anime, you encounter him once, and that's it. But other characters have greater impact than an 11-year-old playing this game would actually realize. This brings us to Mr. Fuji and Blaine. These two were responsible for the creation of Mewtwo and the discovery of Mew. Long before the start of the game, Mr. Fuji lived on Cinnabar Island and was known as Dr. Fuji. Reading through the journals in the Pokemon Mansion, you learn about how they discovered a new Pokemon in South America. Yeah, the English translation said South America. We're just gonna pretend that never happened, because Game Freak sure does. So this new Pokemon was Mew, and after capturing Mew, they experimented on it, tapping into its DNA to make a clone of it. This is something that apparently Mew never forgot, and neither did Mr. Fuji. As in Pokemon Emerald, when you go to Faraway Island and encounter Mew, there is a message that pleads for only a kind-hearted person to ever set foot on the island again. The author's name was smudged in the American version, but in the Japanese version, you can clearly see Mr. Fuji's name. This clearly shows Mr. Fuji's remorse for what they did to Mew, as well as Mew's return to solitude after its experiences. Well, of course, things go as wrong as possible, or with the clone Mewtwo breaking out of the Pokemon Mansion. And then he goes in search of strong opponents that eventually leads it to the unknown dungeon. So all of this rambling is basically for me to say, there's tremendous lore if you look for it, which is a really nice touch in a simplistic game made for children. Oh, and don't get me started on Lieutenant Surge and the Pokemon War, because that will just lead us into a rabbit hole. And we don't want to go there. It's a rabbit hole full of theories on how most of the adults went and participated in a great Pokemon war, and how the main character's father had probably passed away during this war, with many others, including both of Blue's parents, which had led him and his sister to becoming orphans, and would explain why there seems to be more children than adults in this region of Kanto. Oh, and there's the Pokedex. I have to mention the Pokedex. Clearly there's something wrong here. Professor Oak gives you the Pokedex at the beginning of the game, which sets you off in your adventure. He tells you it's his lifelong dream to discover and research all these Pokemon. But tell me something. If he created the Pokedex, and the Pokedex clearly has all the research of every single Pokemon that gets activated, or the data on them gets activated the minute that you catch the Pokemon, doesn't that mean Professor Oak already caught all the Pokemon and already researched all the Pokemon, because clearly the data is in the Pokedex already? So the whole beginning of the game is just based off of a lie. Maybe this is just me reading into it, but clearly when you catch Mewtwo, it fills up the Pokedex with all the available information of Mewtwo, who is supposed to be some sort of unknown Pokemon that was created in a lab, but apparently Professor Oak's Pokedex that he created already had the data in there, just you needed to capture Mewtwo, and then the data autofilled. How does that work? That's not how things work in Discovery. I'm sorry. But anyways, now that I've talked your ear off regarding the story, let's talk about the Pokemon and catching them all. In Red and Blue, there are 151 Pokemon, but in reality, you only need to catch 150 that are available between the two games to complete the Pokedex in the game, which gives you a certificate. Back in the days of Gen 1, it was much harder to complete the Pokedex, as to do so, you needed to use a link cable to connect two Game Boys together to trade. The tricky part to completing your Pokedex was getting the starter Pokemon. Since the only way to completing the Pokedex is to have every form of every Pokemon, it made it difficult if your friends already evolved their Pokemon. What my friends and I did was, when I bought my game, I restarted my game over and over, trading the different starters, so we would all have the starter Pokemon in our games for us to use. This was a tedious process, as it took a long time to do, at least until we found the link cable glitch, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Other Pokemon relied on trading to evolve. This was a mechanic I really hated. If you wanted an Alakazam, you needed to trade a Kadabra, and it would evolve. Same with Gengar, and Machamp, and Golem. It caused issues because if you didn't have very many friends, or you weren't around your friends at the time, or they didn't have the game, you couldn't evolve those Pokemon. It was nearly impossible to do unless you had another Game Boy and another game. And then there's version exclusives. This was an ingenious way for Nintendo to sell more units. If you had red version and you wanted Vulpix, you needed to trade with a blue version. If you had blue version and you wanted a Growlithe, you needed to trade with a red version. This was a good way to get players to interact with each other. At my school, we would constantly meet up to trade for Pokemon we didn't have, or trade our Pokemon that needed to evolve. We would do so frequently, and we would also battle each other. So much so, in fact, we would break into teams and have our own Pokemon wars. Yeah, we were those kind of nerds. So, I would say mission accomplished. It got so out of hand that at my school, they ended up having to ban Pokemon and Game Boys. And if you were caught having your Game Boy out, they would take it away and potentially send you to indoor suspension for the day or give you detention. On top of this, Nintendo would hold Pokemon conventions or gatherings, usually at a local mall. At these conventions, you could interact with other players, and you could trade other Pokemon with each other. And it was a lot of fun to experience that. I myself got to join in a couple of those at my local mall. And while you got to meet new people and trade people, it in a way, it made you feel kind of how Ash did when he traded his Butterfree. Because if you traded a Pokemon that you spent a lot of time raising, you kind of felt sad. Nintendo did a fantastic job, or I should say Game Freak did a fantastic job, making you actually care about your Pokemon. Because you raised them. Now, let's talk about some problems, because there are problems. Every game has problems, especially the game that first comes out. Now, being the first games in the series, of course, there's going to be some bugs and issues. The most famous glitch being the missing no glitch. This glitch would allow you to make unlimited number of items as well as make random Pokemon spawn where they were not supposed to. This glitch required you to go to Viridian City, talk to the old man who teaches you how to catch a Pokemon. Then you fly to Cinnabar Island and you surf off the east coast of it, up and down. And eventually you encounter Missing No. Once you encounter Missing No, you run away from him. And I believe it's either the 4th or 5th item that's in your slot would get turned into a jumble of numbers as the amount that you have in your inventory. And you could repeat this as many times as you want. And many of us use this glitch to be able to have unlimited Master Balls, unlimited full restores, unlimited max revives, unlimited nuggets. You get the idea? So on and so forth. Another issue with this game, and this wasn't a bug, but it was an issue nonetheless, and this is a big one in my opinion, was Mew. Outside of doing the unknown Mew glitch at the time, or attending certain Pokemon events, or sending your game to Nintendo themselves, because yes, this was something you could do, and a friend of mine did just this, there was no way to obtain Mew. This would essentially make completing your Pokedex with all 151 nearly impossible. There was also another glitch that was possible with trading on the link cables. And this was something that I mentioned earlier in the video. This glitch required you to have 2 Game Boys, the link cable, and 2 Game Boy games. You would then trade your Pokemon, and you could essentially clone the Pokemon that you wanted to trade. To do so, you had to turn your game off at the right moment before it saves, and then you would clone that Pokemon. Unfortunately, doing this method could corrupt your data and erase everything that you have built up. Oh, and since I just remembered this, the Missing No glitch could also give you a Pokemon with unusual attacks. For example, in my game, if I leveled up Missing No with Rare Candy, it would evolve into a Muck with Water Gun, Fly, and Sky Attack. Also, leveling Missing No with Rare Candies allowed you to level up Pokemon to level 255 with absurd stats. But if you leveled the Pokemon with XP, it would level down to 100. Music in video games is one of the most important aspects of games. It's basically on par with gameplay and story. You could have the best gameplay to any game, but if you didn't have the right soundtrack, the game fell flat. Fortunately, Pokemon delivers with one of the most memorable soundtracks to any game. And we're talking Zelda levels of memorable. From the moment you turn the game on and hear the intro to the creepy theme of Lavender Town, the game delivers. The intro music lets you know that this will be an adventure you won't soon forget. The battle music changes in different fights, letting you know the severity of the fight. If it's a regular trainer battle, the music is a normal battle theme. But for gym fights, the battle theme informs you this will be a tougher match. The Lavender Town theme tells you something is wrong in the town. As you soon find out, there is a Pokemon graveyard and that Team Rocket has taken over the towering graveyard. It's moments like these that make games great, and Pokemon never misses its mark with any of the wonderful soundtracks. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow were marvels for the time they released, taking full advantage of the capabilities of the Game Boy, which was something no other game had done before. It was extraordinary. The thrill of encountering the different Pokemon and trying to catch them has been such a strong mechanic that at its core remains unchanged with each new release. Seeing my Charmander level and evolve as I progressed made me feel accomplished and proud. It made me feel like I could accomplish anything as long as I trained harder and learned more, and not just in the game but in my own life. And even after all this time, booting up the game on my live stream made me feel like I did when I first played the game, almost like I wasn't playing it, but my 13-year-old self was. And now as an adult, I get to share my experiences with my own kids and have them go on their own Pokemon adventures, which I have to admit is really freaking amazing. Man, That was a lot. And I appreciate those who made it this far. This was honestly the first time I've done this, and I honestly didn't think I had this much to say. But I do want to thank you all tremendously for watching. And to my cousin for the amazing intro. And if you would like to check out his channel, link is in the description. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can click on that join button down below as well. Man. But until then, I'll see you all in Johto.